The Facilities and Finance Committee meeting. Make sure everybody's microphones are on. Tonight's agenda is pretty full. First thing on the agenda is verification of the meeting being properly posted.
Yes, it has been.
Okay. Then the next thing is, there's Ms. Ranichek. Just started here, Ms. Ranichek. The next thing on the agenda is opportunity for citizens to speak. Okay, not seeing any. Okay. Now, in terms of the agenda tonight, do we have to take a roll call first, or we never do a roll call? Everyone's here tonight except for Ms. Madden, who's excused. Okay. On our agenda tonight, we have action items, information items, there's a total of 6 items altogether, but one of our committee members has suggested that because of the guest here tonight, that we move the information item tax incremental district financing plan to the front of the agenda. So we're going to cover that first out of consideration for we don't want anyone to fall asleep during the meeting. So.
This is going to be exciting.
Yeah.
Trouble.
So, gentlemen, please introduce yourselves, or should I have Mr. Como, you're our representative that works with these people, but we'll let them introduce themselves.
Or Darren can. Darren's been working closely with both of these gentlemen.
Yeah, we've been in conversation, Kevin and Rich and Jennifer, who's not here, have been talking about the city's plan they're considering related to mainly TID 14, but the impact it could have on the other tax incremental districts, or TID, and then the impact it could have on the school district. So the dollars involved, I thought, and the city offered to come and talk to the F&F committee about this. And I put in your packet just a brief summary of what a TIF or TID is, just so you have some background on it. It's not a topic that gets a lot of play generally. So if, and then I also put a financial impact calculation on your desk, but I think I'll let them present first and then we can talk about this afterwards. So Kevin, if you want to do your presentation, then we can answer any questions they might have.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Kevin Lanner. I'm the city administrator. This is Rich Abbott, our finance director. And thank you very much for having us tonight. We're very happy to be here. As Darren mentioned, we have several tax increment financing districts, or TIDs, in the city, and the school district probably participates in some that are outside the city limits as well. Those tax increment financing districts are controlled by a joint review board, which consists of 5 members, a citizen representative, a representative of the city, a representative of the county, a representative of the school board, and a representative of the technical college taxing district. And what we're talking about tonight is a proposal that the city's been working on for quite some time, related to the potential to donate some TIF revenue from one district to some others. And I'm going to just walk you briefly through the presentation here and then be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So just by way of background, we're talking about an amendment to TID 14. It's one that pretty much everyone knows. It's the shops at Fox River. So if the Target and all that stuff out there. It was created in 2003 to promote, originally to promote industrial development, believe it or not. But in 2008, we added the former Fleming site, which became the shops at Fox River redevelopment. It was amended a second time in 2008 to add some additional infrastructure expenditures, and then in 2012 we subtracted some land from the district. So that is the district that was created to promote redevelopment, and as many of you that have been here for a long time remember, a pretty highly industrialized area, which has now become a really rather thriving commercial area for the city. The next slide just shows you the current boundaries, which pretty much everyone knows where that's at, but it's bordered by Sunsets, and it includes the Industrial Springs, the Spring City Industrial Park and the shops at Fox River. And so What we're proposing tonight is to accomplish some goals for the district and for the taxpayers as a whole. The first goal for us is to close several of our existing TIF districts earlier than originally projected. So each TIF district has a statutory life, or how long it can be open for. And we would believe through this amendment, we would close multiple districts earlier than that statutory life. We'd then be able to return the total value of that to the general tax rolls, because currently TIF districts, as they sit, the base value from when they were created goes to the taxing bodies for their general operations, and the remaining increment goes to support those TIF districts through funding infrastructure, economic development incentives, and other things like that. And so we would return the value to the general tax roll and also reduce burden on taxpayer. That's one goal. And then we also, through a strategy that we've been working on, we would save money for taxpayers by being able to call debt early and then saving millions of dollars on interest costs related to those TIFs. So we have some financial projections. The numbers shown in the plans are estimates, and actual numbers vary. They depend each year on the actual assessments of the property, so the property tax assessments, what all the entities' tax rates are. So actually, many of you received your tax bill in the mail today, or will be soon. And so you can see on that tax bill the different rates that the different entities charge. And then sometimes those TIF numbers change because of state legislation. So our friends in Madison sometimes like to make things interesting for the taxing entities, like school districts and cities, and they will change things on us, and then it changes how those TIFs operate. But we really try to adhere to two basic goals of closing districts as early as possible and saving interest costs when we were looking at the amendment. Real briefly, we have two scenarios, either of which would be accomplished by the amendment. And the thing to remember is that under current state law, the city we can only donate to blight and mixed-use districts. Current state law does not allow industrial districts to accept donations. For whatever reason, it's just something that was not written into the law at the time. And so if we were to be able to do a donation from TIF 14 to the three districts that you see here, which is TIF 11, TIF 17, and TIF 18, these are three mostly industrial-based districts. We would be able to close the districts early. And you can see in the chart, this first chart, that those districts would be closed 4 years early in case of TIF 11, 7 years early in the case of TIF 17, and 5 years early in the case of TIF 18. The total interest savings by closing those early would be $2.3 million. We accomplished that by moving some increment created in TIF 14 over to these districts and paying off debt and calling debt early and saving interest on some previous debt that was issued. The other scenario that we considered is donating to several other districts, which includes 2 industrial districts. But in order to do this, we need special legislation from the state legislature. And it would allow our industrial districts to receive donations. And so if we were to do that process and be able to achieve that goal, we would save $3.2 million through donations to these districts 11, 12, 17, 19, and 20. The type of TID is listed there, and the number of years early is also listed there as well. So that scenario is unlikely unless we're able to move some legislation through the legislature, which is, we're going to try, but we don't have high hopes that that's going to happen. So those savings would be significantly more than the original. We will use scenario one if the amendment is approved, and and we can get and we cannot get state legislation changed at the state level. We would implement scenario two if we were able to get state legislation. So we would exhaust all our efforts to implement scenario two first, because that would allow us to close more districts and save more taxpayer funds. One of the things that is different in terms of the city and how the city and the county and even the technical district look at our tax levy and how they interact is that the school has a different funding model than cities and counties. And so we have different goals when it comes to how we manage these TIF districts and that sort of thing. We are trying and we are working very hard to get the TIF districts closed as early as possible, and in that process have any leftover dollars be as close to zero as possible, because leftover dollars are kind of unused or unmanaged funds that aren't being applied to any project within a TIF district. We want to get those dollars back on the tax roll so that we can have more levy relief and spread the tax burden across our residents. Counties have the same types of goals. In the school district case, your funding formula works differently, and I don't claim, the folks on this committee know more about that funding formula than I ever will, and I really don't want to learn it because it is very interesting. But you have state aids, which essentially, the way I understand it, the levy changes and state aid changes along with it, and so it doesn't have as greater as impact when we close these TIF districts to you and your funding formula. The sheet that we had talked about with Darren previously, that there's impacts to the school district or potential impacts to the school districts in terms of the money left over after the TIF district is closed. So when a TIF district is closed, there's any funds left over that's not applied to a purpose, like paying debt or paying an economic development incentive. If all the needs of the district have been met and there's funds left over, and there sometimes are and there sometimes are not, just depending upon the timing of the closure, those dollars get distributed back to the taxing bodies in the proportion of how the tax rate is broken up. So the school district is roughly, with the new change in getting rid of the state property tax, is about 40%, and the city is about 50%, excuse me, and the other are smaller proportions of that. And so those dollars get distributed back to the bodies for whatever they want to use it for, tax relief, projects, building your reserve fund, whatever it may be. And so what you have from Darren here is a projection, is that if we close these early, the change to the school district in those incremental dollars that would go back to the school district. And in that case, the school district's excess funds or that distribution would be less, would be as shown on the exhibit that was distributed with the packet tonight. So that's what we're asking to do, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I brought the finance guy who's much more intelligent than I and can answer them much more articulately than I can as well. So
I normally let board members or committee members ask questions first, and I probably should, but I just wanted to ask, just for clarity purposes, on this status quo column, that 2022 number, which is 8.4 million, if that closes out under status quo condition, we'd be entitled to 40% of that?
correct.
Roughly 40%.
Yeah.
So that would be 3.3 million, about somewhere around there.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And okay, so that's really what we're talking about, is taking 3.3 million of district dollars, which is what they would be, that would go someplace else I think you're saying, yeah, they'd go someplace else if we accepted proposal 1 or proposal 2, or if proposal 1 or proposal 2 got accepted.
And so it's hard to say that with absolute certainty, and I know that you just want a yes or no answer, because we're managing those TIF districts, so our goal is always to get as close to zero. So that 8 million is kind of an anomaly, because of the timing of how the debt payments and the expenditures of the TIF district stop, and the year in which you close it goes forward, and the amount of value, because there's a lot of value in that district. So it could be that much. We don't know that for sure, and we would actually be working very hard to keep that as low as possible, because you don't want to overtax the TIF district if there's no purpose for it. But in that case, yes, that's the way the projection looks.
Wait, okay, so I think the key point is this is a highly successful TIF district, right?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
probably one of the most successful TIF districts I've seen in the boundaries of the Waukesha School District, which includes more than just the city of Waukesha.
Yeah.
There's a couple towns involved there. Sometimes people think TIF districts are just to the benefit of the developers, but in this case, it shows it was actually to the benefit of the taxpayers, because it generated so much more revenue that wouldn't have been there otherwise. Is that correct?
Yep.
So this happened to be a very successful TIF.
Yes.
And since it's a very successful TIF, now the debate will be whether we close it out and put the money to our, whatever purposes we see it to, or whether we agree to, along with other bodies, to proposal 1 or proposal 2.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Just an update, we did have our first joint review board meeting tonight on this, and we may be looking at some other proposals coming forth. That's going to be in Rich's hands. You heard the discussion at the committee level, seeing if there might be something that can offer maybe a compromise somewhere between the plan that maximizes the return for the city versus maybe something in between for other taxing entities such as the school district. Because the key here for us to understand is these monies are above the revenue limits for us. So this is boon money. So we don't have to go to referendum for it. And when we vote on whether or not to do a TIF, we vote on whether or not we think it's going to be successful in and of itself, and not necessarily with the broad scope of, well, we have 29 active TIFs or however many, 15?
14.
14.
No, we just closed 12. We just
14.
closed 2.
Sorry about that. 14. So we don't really, as a joint review board, we don't really think of them as a whole until this last year was the first year, or the second year we were required to have an annual meeting on the overview of everything. So that really starts to I think help the joint review board. So that was beneficial. But coming forth, hopefully in January, is probably when we'll maybe see some other proposals floating out there, which would be more beneficial to the school district.
So in terms of this particular situation, it's a little bit difficult for us to feel comfortable with seeing money going to closing out for proposal 1 and proposal 2. It'd be difficult for me anyway. I don't know about the other committee members. But we actually have a fund that we created a couple of years ago. There's a very small balance in it where we can put this type of money into and use it without affecting our revenue limits to capital projects.
Right.
Maintenance, things like that. It was something Mr. Clark came up with, and I wasn't overly excited about it, but now I am, because there's a vehicle now that we can take funds from this TIF district that we didn't expect to now put into there and use that to overcome some future issues that we may have 10, 15 years down the line, you know, we have, for instance, we have football fields that the turf will eventually wear out on. We have furnaces to fix, and, you know, last time we went to, we did the energy thing, which has now been eliminated. We can't do that anymore. And in that case, we had to go to our taxpayers, and we increased the levy on the taxpayers, which is never a good thing. So preserving these monies and taking them and putting them in this new fund that Mr. Clark helped us create really is probably our preference. That'd be my preference versus sharing them with other TIFs. But other board members might have their opinions, but that would be where I would be more inclined to say, I'm not sure how we would benefit by taking $2 to $3 million and paying off other TIFs early. And keep in mind, we have more than just the city taxpayers to worry about. We have a broader spectrum of taxpayers because we cover more than the city. Even though the city is very important to us, they're a large portion of what we do. So I'm sure the towns would also like to hear they're very important to us. So we try not to favor, but nevertheless, you got to take all that into consideration when you're talking about moving dollars from the schools. After?
So what would be our benefit?
Well,
What would be the benefit to transfer money, basically, is that the shop said?
Yeah.
Is
yeah,
extra, right?
yeah. So the biggest benefit is that it would allow us to close out other TIF districts early, which then would add that value and would benefit the taxpayers in that way. So we would add that value back onto our tax rolls.
And that value is what? Not to cut you off, but what would, are you,
It depends on what district we're talking about.
District 14's got a total incremental value of about 84 million. So when you're talking in terms of county or city or tech college, we get 50% of that. So as far as what we're looking at, that's the value we come back in. The overall, what's the benefit to a TIF district is typically you created the economic development.
yeah, no, I know that, but what's the benefit to the school district?
On a closeout of the
Yeah,
district?
monetarily. I mean, you're
On a
gonna-
closeout of the district, if there's funds available, so where you, I don't know, Darren, if you just received a closeout payment, probably of, if I'm doing my math right in my head, somewhere around $68,000. I think we closed that district with about 200 in it. So there must have been, you must have recently received some check to put into this special fund.
Or whatever fund we chose to put it in, but this,
Yeah.
when you see an amount this big,
Right, no, I would agree. I mean,
Yeah. So to answer your question, the values. I'm trying to find the values of the different. Do you see that?
Well-
So there's we have, under one scenario, we were addressing
These are the
3 different TIFs, and then the other, we're addressing 4 different TIFs. And the amounts range from 44.8 million in today's dollars. So for TIF 11, TIF 14 is $78.1 million. TIF 18 is 4.5 million, and TIF 17 is 24 million. So those are all pretty substantial for us, and so that added onto the tax roll would then be able to spread the burden off of the current homeowners. That would be the benefit.
I guess I got a little question about that because I think it's different for you than it is for us.
quite a bit different.
In your case, as the city, now you can correct me if I'm wrong because I'm no better at city finances than you guys are at
Right.
school district finances. So I appreciate if you'd correct me if I'm wrong. When you take and roll in these TIFs,
Yep.
it essentially gives you more at the same levy, and you're allowed to keep your per thousand levy the same. I assume your mill levy can stay more or less constant.
Yep.
You would have more property to tax against, so it'd increase your revenue earning capability on those properties.
Correct.
Doesn't happen for us.
Right. And
We
that's-
don't get a penny more out of that.
Right.
Because we're on revenue limits.
Right.
All we do is our mill levy comes down, so we would be giving up $3 million with nothing in return, essentially.
Right. And I'm saying,
The district.
And this is the area, and we partner with the school district on this sort of stuff, and we appreciate that all. But on this particular issue, the district itself as an entity and the city itself as an entity just have different goals and different ways they have to manage their finances and their levies differently. My point is that I'm just pointing it out to the taxpayers of the city as a whole, not members of the school district or of the city. I'm just saying, as a taxpayer of the city as a whole, we add that value back on. The residents themselves burden from the city perspective and the county perspective will go down.
But that's not true, because you don't have to have it go down, because you can keep your mill levy the same.
Correct.
So you don't have a requirement that would have the taxpayers
Right.
benefit.
I shouldn't
So,
say go down.
In our case, the taxpayers do benefit, because instead of us going back and asking them for more money, we already have the money that came to us through this TIF closeout. So we actually, because we're restricted in what we can, our levy has to go down. When the value of property goes up, it doesn't mean we get more money.
Right.
We're a little different than everybody else, and I think most taxpayers don't understand that. When they see something going out, well, you must have plenty of money. Look at all this new building around here.
Right.
It doesn't work that way for the school
Right.
districts.
Yeah.
So it just so happens we have a wonderful opportunity, because of the shops, the success of the shops, to really help out the school district and the taxpayers that pay into the school district. And I have a hard time with turning a blind eye to that.
One thing to also remember too is the city is fully responsible for all the TIF districts. So a failed TIF district, if we close the entire book of business in the whole, the city funds that entire fund. So we're also watching out, I mean, it's a global, I call it the book of business. Not everyone sees it that way, but ultimately, as the city finance director, I need to look at it that way. But Joe kind of referenced, we're learning a lot more about everybody's different views of TIF districts. I'm glad we have a TIF 14, because it gives us an opportunity to do something, but we are going to be reviewing different scenarios. And the other thing I'd point out is the $8 million that's in the status quo too. And we discussed this at the Joint Review Board, is would we really keep TIF 14 open that long to accumulate that much money? And it's unlikely that we would. In fact, the county really does not want us to at all. If, as Joe saw in Norm, he wants it closed much sooner than that. So, that's why we're trying to come to a compromise. How can we, number one, reduce interest costs, two, close districts as soon, and three, also have some money left over to distribute to the school district. Now, don't get me wrong, too, the city, if you remember, 50% gets half of the distribution. And we would also like to have a windfall, because in this scenario, you get 3.3, we get 4.2 to do what we want with, which we don't have to go to tax levy and under ERP and whatnot, and could definitely use that in our equipment replacement fund. So, I guess I just wanted to point some of those factors out too.
Mr.
Yeah,
Como?
First of all, the first plan and the plan that you offer up is the best plan for the city. Status quo is the best for us. What I liked about the Joint Review Board, though, is we started to talk more about the county, a little bit on WCTC, more on the city and more on the district. And we're all learning about the differences, and we have many competing factors that are going on here. What I liked about the Joint Review Board meeting, though, is we want to understand each other's position, and we want to try and move towards something that perhaps we can all benefit from. Would I like to have the status quo? Sure. I might be the only no vote, though, and it takes at least 3 votes to keep the status quo. Would you guys like to have the city plan as is? Absolutely. But you need 3 of the 5 votes. So what I really enjoyed about the discussion tonight is we're trying to balance out a lot of complex factors between the different local government entities and see if we can come up with something that benefits perhaps everybody. Maybe not as maximize we can't maximize everyone's situation. Can't do it. It's impossible. But can we come to a balance here that where everyone can have some sort of benefit is really what I think. I thought the spirit of the Joint Review Board meeting tonight was.
I think the challenge is, you know, we all ought to be working together. And I don't want to get into a situation where we've agreed to a 2022 closeout date and then 3 of the 5 members decide, hey, it's a great idea to change that date. And it disadvantages the school district of Waukesha significantly. I think that would be, I'd have to wonder whether it would really be right that we could change a TIF that was approved basically simply on a majority vote and disadvantage one of the members so much, right? And of course, the city of Waukesha, in a way, they're kind of being disadvantaged too if it was forced on it by the other 3, and it was just the 2 of us against it and the other 3 for it. But the other 3 probably don't care that much because it doesn't impact them as much as it impacts the 2 of us. So I think it's best that the 2 of us sit down and decide what's best for the 2 of us, and because that's where the biggest impact is. And I would advise the city that, you know, the school district of Waukesha, as the city has done for us, we have done great things for the school district, for the city of Waukesha. Parkland up on the hill, I go up there every day, and that was a pretty good, nice piece of parkland that was supplied at a fairly favorable price to the city of Waukesha because there should be a park up there. The annexation of the land out in TT, that was a pretty nice parcel of land that we went to a lot of work to get moved into city boundaries from town boundaries, which will eventually someday be a new development of some type, whether it's schools or homes or whatever out there. And the third thing that we've done that I'm aware of as a district is we significantly reduced our water consumption through football fields, some of the stuff we did with the energy efficiency project. And by significantly reducing our water consumption, it leaves water for businesses to use and to grow and develop in this community. So we do our part as best we can all the time. And sometimes I don't think the people at the city really understand that we are doing our part. And at the same time, the city does their part. So I think it's best for us to kind of work together and get this resolved in a way where we each understand what each of us would be giving up or gaining or not gaining.
Just a partner on a librarian this year, or coming up soon.
We'll always, well, we partnered on the healthcare thing. That's been an important
Clinic,
partner.
yeah.
Yeah, the clinic.
That's been successful.
We partner with the county on the nature center. I mean, there's just tons of things that we've worked together on in this community, and we're proud of that. And we're proud of our cooperation on these TIF districts. I think we've only voted against one in all my years on it, and I think that one didn't go ahead anyway. So in all my years on the board, I think we've only voted against one. And besides, we're just one vote, and we have to understand that there's a broader than just a school district when we approach these projects. But when it comes to money, that's a whole different story.
And I think that, as Mr. Cuomo said, that we're going to run some different alternatives, and so I appreciate the discussion. I'm happy to answer more questions, but we'll do that, and we'll bring it back through the appropriate channels if that's appropriate. So
I just want to say congratulations to the city and the TIF districts for a highly successful district. There's another one that's I think been highly successful that people would say wasn't so successful, but I won't say which one it was. But if you look at downtown Waukesha today, without TIF dollars, downtown Waukesha wouldn't be what we have today. So the TIF program for the city of Waukesha overall has been very successful.
thank you.
So it sounds like this will be an item on a future agenda. I don't know if it'll be January or February or whatever, but we thought the dollar amounts were large enough that they had to come before FNF. A lot of times these TIFs will close and we don't even, because they're near zero at the end, that we don't even really talk about it. Joe does his vote.
And we actually have a policy. So if our policy states that if there's enough time for the Joint Review Board representative, which is me in this case, can bring this back to committee or board, that's my obligation. So I'm just following through on a policy that we have. A lot of times there isn't time and things move pretty quickly, and I don't have this kind of luxury to bring in my fellow colleagues into the discussion, and I'm representing the district during those times. So this was, the timing of this works so that we could do it this way. So thank you, gentlemen, for that. And
Thank you, appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, that was actually great news. It's nice to start out a meeting with great news. Successful TIF district. Now we'll jump back into our normal agenda, approval of monthly vouchers. I assume you didn't have any troublemakers this time, Sherry?
No, there were no questions this month.
I move approval of the monthly vouchers.
second?
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. McCaffrey to approve, a second by Mr. Como. Additional discussion, if any? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None opposed. Motion passes 4-0. Next action item is an online at-risk school.
You guys want to come up and, if you recall, I believe it was September, when we had our F&F meeting out at South, there was a discussion related to broadening the scope of an alternative school. And there was some feedback provided by the committee, and Rick's here to provide you the updated proposal. So I'm going to turn it over to him. This is more instruction than finance, so I'm out of my zone here a little bit. So I'll turn it over to Rick and Joe to walk you through some of the updates that have been made, and then answer any questions you might have related to this.
Thank you. So we very much appreciated the opportunity we had to have a discussion at the September Finance and Facilities meeting, and we took very seriously the feedback that was given at that meeting, and that's what we're bringing forth today, are the updates and the changes that we made to the proposal. There were really two main items that were kind of our action items after we left the meeting. One was to come up with a new name for the school that didn't reference eAchieve, to preserve the legacy of eAchieve. At-risk school, the alternative school, separate entity. Then the other charge was to bring some more financial details, and so those changes, financial details isn't really a change. There was also quite a bit of discussion about why this is needed, and that's how I'd like to start the presentation. A couple of slides that I put together here. First of all, it's really important to understand that when we're accepting open enrollment, open enrolled students, that we essentially have to accept all open enrolled students. We don't have much of an opportunity at all to pick and choose which ones we will accept and which ones we won't accept. There are a few caveats to that. And in the regular open enrollment window, which runs from February through April, if a student has been expelled from a previous district, we do have a little bit of leeway there. If we don't have space, that would be a reason we could deny. If the special education services that the student requires are not provided in the district, that would be another reason why we could deny. But outside of that, during regular open enrollment, those are the only reasons we could deny from enrolling. During the alternate open enrollment period, which starts in July and is only for the current school year, not forward thinking to the next one, all of those same 3 points apply. Plus, if the family chooses they feel it's in the best interest of the student to come, but we disagree for some reason that it's not in the best interest, we could use that reason for denial, but the family at that point would have an opportunity to appeal that denial, and in almost every case that we're aware of, the DPI sides with the family. Those have also been conversations that the DPI has made phone calls to me, asking questions about discrimination and things like that, so we really try to stay as far away from that as we can. So what does that mean for us then, since we do have to essentially accept everybody that applies? Well, most of our students that come to eAchieve are successful, but some aren't. And the reasons why are somewhat varied, but it usually leads to non-participation on the student's part. In the virtual world, there's no such thing as truancy, but the state statutes talk about participation. And we go through a series of interventions to work with the family and the student to try and get them to participate and engage. But if all those efforts fall through and the student still doesn't participate, the state statutes allow us to send those students back to their resident district, and we do that. The table up here shows the degree to which we've done that over the last couple of years. You'll see a third Friday column and also an approved OEX and IDT. OEX is for the alternate open enrollment period. IDT is in-district transfer. There is a little bit of overlap between the third Friday column and the approved OEX and TD columns. But then the last column shows the number of students that we sent back to their resident district due to non-participation in that year. You can see it's a sizable number. So the bottom line is we have students that come. Some of them aren't appropriate. Others come with struggles. Even though we're able to help many, we aren't able to help all, and we have this situation where we've got some non-participants. Unfortunately, some of those non-participants don't get picked up by their resident district. They're supposed to, and we notify the families and we notify the resident district, but they don't, and they become eAchieve's dropouts because we were the last school in attendance. Aside from that, though, we do feel like we would like to do more for these students that are being sent back as one other final try to engage them. They very often come from very unique situations. You'll see 41 have already been sent back this year. In reviewing those students before the letter was sent, I noticed that many of them, their families are, they come from very unique families. They may only have grandparents or a grandparent who's trying to support them, or a single parent, and certainly not disparaging any of those families or their makeup, but they have unique situations. Some of those, the parents simply don't have the skills or the availability because they have to work to support their family. We see an opportunity to step in here and do more, but not in our current model known as eAchieve. So, what we're proposing here then is an alternative school that's exclusively targeted at-risk students. And the new name would be the Online At-Risk School, a rather obvious name, but it clearly spells out exactly what the purpose of the school is for. Serve exclusively at-risk students. It would give us more flexibility to do some unique programming, especially in light of the students' unique needs. Perhaps they're spending 8 hours of the day at Rogers, for example, and trying to get school done on top of that. Or that's just one example of many of the highly varied situations. But the bottom line is that this program would provide much more support, much like what we're expecting the parents to do. But in many situations, it's not happening. So they would be meeting regularly, multiple times a week, with a study skills teacher who's going to be planning with them, setting goals, monitoring their work, teaching important life skills like organization, time management, how to solve problems, because those are the very skills that they're lacking to be successful in our current program. And then the capstone program would be the competency diploma. It would move from eAchieve Academy, where it's sitting right now, into OARS, the online at-risk school, and I'll talk a little bit about why. I think I've got that on the next slide. Yep, so one of the questions that's been asked is, well, why can't we just do all these supportive things in eAchieve itself? And there's a really important reason why we can't. We're trying to do some of those things, but what we're finding is that some of those very supports we're trying to put in place are negatively affecting eAchieve in terms of reporting. For example, any student at eAchieve who graduates under the competency diploma program, those graduates do not count as part of our graduation rate on the state report card. On the last report card, our graduation rate would have been 10 percentage points higher if we would have been able to count those, but that's not the way the state counts things on the school report card. Dropouts are a triple threat. They affect our dropout deduction, our graduation rate, and our graduation gap closing score. But having these students work in an alternative school would attribute those dropouts to the alternative school that's much more better equipped to handle that and report back out, because we'd be reporting alternate accountability. The bottom line is, this is serving a group of students that has a very different need, and so we need a different model, which and that's why we're proposing a different school who are already our students. They're already here, and we're trying to work with them the best that we can, but within the confines of eAchieve Academy, we're just not able to meet their needs like we'd like to. That's the end of my slides. Oh no, the most important question. So the financial implications for this then. The expense, the only additional expense above what our current expenses are would be the addition of study skills teachers to work with these students and do those one-on-one meetings. So if we take the example of 100 students and they're meeting with a study skills teacher twice a week for 15 minutes each week, which is not so different than what, for example, a special ed teacher would meet with a student at eAchieve and provide very similar kinds of support. Well, that would be about 50 hours per week, and that equates to about 1.25 FTE, $100,000 for salary and benefits. That's about what the expense would be to serve 100 students. Revenue side of things, we feel it's quite conservative actually, that these 100 students would stay enrolled for an additional 35 days in the district, because now we're trying one more thing to try and engage them, try and help them seek success, giving those supports, and that's really only about a month and a half of additional time spent in the district. But if you multiply that by the daily rate, we are $137,000 of additional revenue, because each day they're here, they're prorated, and that more than pays for the additional expense for the study skills teacher. We think that many of these students will finish out the year and then come back because of the additional supports. So the average of 35 additional days, we think, is very conservative. I do think that is the last part of my slide presentation, demonstrating the updates from the last time we met.
Discussion, or is one of the board, one of my
Start.
start?
You can go. It doesn't matter. Either way. We'll get to you.
I read through this and, you know, it's a, first of all, I see a lot of things that just, they look like you, and at times it looks like we took oars and it dropped it right over you achieve. And I mean, even the description of the educational program, it starts out achieve offers, so that could have been a typo, but you would think that would have been ORS offers. That's on page 6.
Page 4.
Page 6.
Page
of the
4, excuse me,
contract
page
or-
4, which is
Page
the
4.
description of the educational program. Once I got my glasses on, I could see the 4. The Achieve does offer that, but we're supposed to be talking about ORs here, so I don't think,
Can you point me to the paragraph, please?
the first one, description of,
Second paragraph from the bottom.
Oh,
yeah.
second from the bottom.
yeah, description of the educational program of the school. Achieve offers a comprehensive, non-secretarian program to give students in grades 5 through 12 identified as at-risk the opportunity. I think you meant to say ORs there.
I think they use the eAchieve contract probably as a,
And that's my
Kinda like-
problem. I mean,
Okay, I see it.
you know, if you're gonna do a program that, if we're gonna do a program that's targeted for a segment of children, then we should start from the ground up. And this looks like what we did is we took eAchieve and said, here's our eAchieve program, let's create another program that parallels it and call it something else so we can handle a segment of kids, which was what the original proposal kind of was. I'm looking at at-risk kids and I'm not really caring for the name either. An at-risk school doesn't really come across well. I really don't want to do an at-risk school. I mean, is the school at risk or are the kids at risk? I mean, that name bothers me a little bit. And the other thing is, why would we do at-risk programs at the age range that's being shown in here? Because that's the age range that we use for eAchieve? I think so.
No,
I'm not really sure why we'd want to take an online program for younger children that are at risk. I really do think that they should be in their home school district at the younger ages, and it's when they get into the higher grade levels that I would say would be more appropriate for us to have a specialized program to support those children. So that's the ones that pop out to me by reading through the proposed contract. And the final thing is I don't like going into anything on a break-even basis. And when we look at what's being proposed here, it's talked about break-even, yet we're still having to use, when it says a principal for ORs, really it's the staff of eAchieve, okay, that's going to be part of this. So it seems more like an additional program under eAchieve that's been relabeled or rebranded as ORs. I just don't see it. And at the other time, I think we should be doing much more in eAchieve and bringing in the right students and a right higher volume of students. And there was supposed to be 1,000 kids there in just the high school level, and we're struggling to get 500 by adding grades. And so I sound a little bit negative, but I guess I am a little bit negative on this one. I don't get it myself. Catherine?
I'm gonna agree with the name. We changed the name of the school at the jail. Off-putting, so I don't know if we should put at risk in the name of a school. We try to, I think, have a better vision or a better portrayal of any school than to call it at risk. I mean, we call a lot of our programs something different. A lot of the students in the transition program are at-risk students, but we don't call it the at-risk. I would look for a different name. I, however, am very interested in helping students that need a little bit extra help with our online school. But I'm not so sure we need to, why can't we just add the FTEs? And maybe there's a legal reason, but why can't we just add the FTE, the study skills teacher, which I think we should have at every school, not just the eAchieve. But why can't we just add that to eAchieve? And why do we have to go that extra step to start a new school, I guess?
It really comes down to the reporting, especially, because the more we try to service those students in e-Achieve, the harder it becomes for us to have a positive school.
Talking about the state of Wisconsin school report card?
So I mentioned the competency program, even if a student wasn't in the competency program to graduate, that hurts us on the state report.
Right. I'm not gonna disagree with you, the state report card. I think that some of the stuff that goes into it is useless and doesn't really tell the story about the school. However, how much, I guess, do you think that the state report card is like referenced a lot when students are looking at a virtual online school? I don't know, I mean.
I think that families that are searching for a virtual school,
Right.
some may, I don't think it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's more everybody else outside of the virtual world that looks at that and says, oh my gosh, this is a terrible thing, without understanding
Right.
at all
Right.
what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm all for the proposal. I think that that should be added to eAchieve, which would help out the students that Mr. O'Brien is talking about. But I just don't know if we need an actual new charter agreement for that help. I'm all for having that kind of help for every student that needs it in the district, not just the virtual schools. But I just don't know if we need an actual new charter agreement to accomplish that on that slide.
So just a question, and Mr. McCaffrey made some excellent points, which I agree with fully. Why, when we had this before us before, the discussion is that we could take at-risk children that come to us through eAchieve and maybe set up a alternative pathway for them once they arrive through our East program, an East alternative school. And if it was the grade levels that I think we should be focusing on, which is the grade levels that go through East, it seemed like a great vehicle for doing this. We'd move them off of the eAchieve program because they weren't well-suited or well-served there, and transfer them over into the East alternative program on an online basis. Why is that not a possibility?
One thing that would have to happen is East would have to then meet all the requirements to be considered an online charter school.
I don't understand that.
Because otherwise, no funding would flow for that student. The only way funding flows into a district for a student who is taking online classes on a full-time basis is all the requirements of an online charter school.
But we don't fund based on it being an online charter school. We fund it based on it being a school of choice for children where we get the transfer dollars out of district. Are there extra funds?
I'm not talking about how we fund it for the district. I'm talking about the state's payment to the district. If they see that there is a student from Green Bay attending Waukesha schools, they're going to look and see, is that student enrolled in an online charter school? And if they're not, they're going to say there's no funding that's going to flow from Green Bay to Waukesha because that student is attending school outside of their geographic boundaries.
I don't think that's true, is it?
I'm certain it's true. 'Cause
Open enrollment?
that was the whole basis of the law back in 15 years ago that threatened to close all virtual schools in the state.
There's still open enrollment between districts, as far as I know, because we lose kids and we get kids all the time.
Right,
So
but they're not, right, but in order for but those students are physically attending those other schools. That's the difference, is the physical attendance.
Certainly seek some clarification on this based off of what the rule is. There are restrictions when it comes down to who can attend where. The physical attendance, which Rick talks about, where you're actually coming to the school. Given the geographic location of many of the students who are in Achieve, it'd be impossible to do that on a day-to-day basis. So we can seek the exact wording from the DPI and provide that in an update if that would be acceptable.
That would be preferable, yes. Como?
Yeah, I appreciate the work that you guys put in from the last time you were visiting this committee. I do get what you're trying to do. I mean, essentially, this parallels what we're doing in our brick and mortar environment. And essentially, this becomes East. Maybe not at the same grade levels. And we should look at that. I think you proposed starting at fourth grade?
Fifth grade.
Fifth grade?
Simply because that is the state parameters between.
Oh, okay.
The state requires that grades 5 through 12, any student who is at risk gets a formal notification, and then that you're doing something additional as a school system to support those students along the way.
Yeah. So I of the dropouts or non-participants, sorry, different terminology.
Yep.
What percentage is in that fifth and sixth grade?
It's lower. Most of our non-participants are in the high school.
Okay. But since the statutes really want us to cover the younger grades, we thought we should.
That's the only reason why it was.
Okay. So I really see this as essentially being that East, it's online East, essentially. Now, it doesn't offer the same services that East does. You know, we have very specific services that we're offering there. But we have a number of students that have issues. And these are the students Patrick is talking about that we should really support when they enroll at eAchieve. They're not successful for a variety of reasons. And I also agree that we should be coming up with a way to support them. And I can see why you're wanting to separate this out as a separate charter school. People do look at those report cards, the state report cards, and our numbers are not accurate, quite frankly, when looking at them right now. And we're just saying, let's get them more accurate. Let's be precise in this. I thought, too, that the contract that you put together did substantially get changed. I mean, I didn't memorize by no means the eAchieve contract. I know you used it potentially as a template, but I thought there were a lot of parts changed to specifically accommodate this, the purpose of the school, who we're targeting, what we're going to provide. There were a few things that I wanted to get a little bit of clarification on. I didn't really understand the computer thing, you know, where they're, on page 2, actually page 5, but 2 of the contract, we're talking about computers and the purchase of, and does that follow the whole eAchieve
Yes.
approach too?
Yes.
So nothing's changed there?
Not as far as the computers go. And you're right, that some elements of this contract are exactly like the current, but there are other parts that are.
Mr. Como, I think we got to be a little careful here. We got a lot to going tonight, and unless we think we're going to approve this tonight, which I don't know if we will, because there's a lot of changes that have to be done, and it'd take us a long time to change it, rewrite the whole thing tonight. I'm just wondering if maybe we should table this. I'm just asking this question of the committee.
From a timing perspective, is there anything driving that we need to do this month as opposed to next month, perhaps?
The only benefit would be, it could be listed on the open enrollment ledger for schools, but that was never one of our primary objectives here, was to have it listed as such. Families then go to apply for open enrollment. Really looking to meet the needs of the students we already have.
just regarding that, is it safe to say that the majority of the students will be applying to E-Achieve and you will be moving them to the at-risk? So it doesn't matter if it's on the ledger, correct? They're not gonna, they're not gonna be on a computer and saying, oh, this ORS sounds.
Right, so
Right.
if we find out, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you're
exactly
gonna be
right.
moving, somebody at
the-
E-Achieve is gonna be making the determination of whether this child needs
Yep.
some extra services or extra
Yep.
help, and then he will be, or she will be moved to the,
Because the district determines placement.
Yes,
of the
right.
student. Right, that's why it
Right.
wasn't a high priority.
right, okay.
So,
Go ahead, Mr. Combs.
so let me ask this question. So we will not be recruiting directly for this. It will only be a referral from E-Achieve into here.
That was not our intent for this coming open enrollment cycle.
Yeah, so.
Down the
So
road,
is, so that's
No, we haven't
100%
crossed
though,
that
not like, I'm just making sure it's
Right, no,
100%,
definitely. No, I
not
agree.
5% or 5%, 95. I wanted to make sure it was to a T. So, okay. And that was the original intent that I thought I heard you guys saying at the first meeting, because there was a question as to whether that was really the intent, or if we were gonna go out and just start recruiting
Well, I
strictly
think-
for these kids.
I think.
These types of
The
kids.
very nature of the name, actually, with all due respect, I think would bring families in because they're looking down the list and they know their student is at risk. They're desperate to find a place. Here's a school that specifically is catered to at-risk students. But we can certainly go back and look at a different. So I think we would get ancillary enrollments even if we're not marketing it.
So we're promoting E-Achieve with an alternative school then? I'm not, I'm just kind of cloudy on that.
You know, we could spend, Mr. Como, I mean, we could spend all night here on this, and I have a problem with someone coming to the committee and saying, we need to approve this tonight so we can hurry up and get it on the, I mean, this is a big decision, and.
I agree.
And I just don't see us, I mean, it's a big decision, it's not a small one, to do it right.
Right. I do have one more question. Are we thinking about, or is there any thought put into moving our students that have been expelled, who are obviously at risk of something, to this school as well? Or is that also in the,
So that certainly
plans.
could be part of that, and Joe, I'm sure, has more that he could share on
Right,
this.
right.
Part of that also determines on how the board expels them. If they expel
Right.
them from all Waukesha schools,
Right.
then E-Achieve is, or ORS, or any
Right.
school is not an option unless it's specifically written.
And I would just say in reviewing expulsion orders from the 30, 40 some odd kids that apply to E-Achieve every year, for districts that have a virtual option, that is a common caveat to the expulsion order, that they are offered placement in such and such virtual academy. So it is an option. It would be something that would have to be appropriate.
Right.
Based off of the order that the board gives.
and so another question I have, just not to, I know we're up against the clock. If we allowed expelled students into the school, say E-Achieve, without, say that ORS is, and it goes, does that adversely affect our report card?
Karen, if
It really is more, not the direct
Okay.
acceptance of them,
Okay,
but their likelihood of success,
right,
those kinds of
May
things could
affect it.
play out
Okay.
negatively.
okay.
Well, gentlemen, I mean, I'm getting the feel from our committee members that they're interested, but there's a lot of questions, and we're not gonna answer this tonight. And so, I know they're gonna come to you privately and ask some more questions, before, as this moves forward, but I don't think tonight's gonna be tonight, and we're pretty swamped up. In fact, I'm wondering if we'll even get to the full information items tonight, and the E-Achieve marketing plan might drop off the list, because we do have a health plan thing. Which one would we, if we ended up shortening up this meeting, which should we shorten?
The
Mr. Clerk?
E-Achieve marketing plan is just some follow-up information. There's no presentation. I just know there was a lot of questions and Rick put together a nice summary. So I just really included in your packet just
Okay.
for your information only. The budget report is as simple as everything is going okay.
So let's, why
The
don't
health
we?
insurance is the one item though I would like to
Yeah,
spend.
right. We have a consultant here tonight, and the board members are sitting out there, so we better move this forward. again, it's always good to have new ideas, but I don't think we're ready for this one quite yet tonight. So with that, thanks, gentlemen.
Okay.
And sorry to cut you off, but I got some very anxious board members back there, anxious to get started with the next meeting. So we'll move right to the wonderful health benefit program, which is very important from a cost and services point of view.
If you recall last December, I think it was, the committee approved and ultimately the board, a change in our prescription benefit management company. And at that time, Jeff Rebetiko was at the meeting and Melissa from my office was at the meeting. We talked about the next phase in our management of our healthcare was to bid out the provider or the network that we utilize as part of our self-funded solution. So tonight's report is just to give you a little background. We went to United Healthcare, Anthem, Humana, Cigna, WA. Aetna looked at fully insured, self-funded options to see if there was a player out there that we really should spend some time with. And it came down to either, mainly on fiscal reasons at that point, but Anthem and United Healthcare were the two companies that we thought we can continue conversations with. One of the things that Chris Hedstrom and I and Melissa had talked about was developing a health plan that provided some choice to staff. Now, whether that's network choice or provider choice, and to give them more options, I guess, in our healthcare program. Anthem, we spent a lot of time on, and truly months on, looking at their solution. And under the Anthem platform, you'd have a narrower network, or you could opt into our existing network, essentially, with the exception of mainly Freighter. There was some disruption where some providers would not be included, and Freighter was the main one. We met with UHC, and actually the timeline that we're on right now really was for a move to Anthem. We knew we'd need more education for staff because they'd have to make the selection come enrollment time. And then we had a meeting with UHC 2 or 3 weeks ago, roughly, to kind of give them their last chance to have us consider them. And actually, our recommendation is to stay with UHC right now. We're still bringing choice into the conversation. They rate their doctors. If you're an A or 2 blue hearts in their scoring system, nothing changes for our staff. Your maximum out of pocket remains the same. But if you go to a provider, a doctor, not a hospital, if you go to a doctor who's not rated that highly, as measured by efficiency and whatever rubrics they use to make that determination, then we have a co-insurance started under this plan. So the choice is really in what doctor you go to. The last page on the back page shows you what we were considering. The top box is our current plan with our current deductibles and maximum out of pockets. Again, the Anthem is, there'd be differentiation. There would have been, if you went with the narrower network, it's cheaper for us and the employee. If you wanted the broad network, you'd pay the differential. And then the UHC, you can see in Tier 2, in Network Tier 2, that if you do go to a doctor that is not 2 blue hearts or highly rated, and about half their doctors are in that category, so it's not like there's 4 of them and no one can get in. So the nice thing about this is there's no disruption in the network. You don't lose Freighter. Mainly was the hottest part of that. You maintain that, but you're also an active participant in how much you want this change to impact you. If you go to 2 blue-hearted rated doctors, there's no change from your existing benefit. If you choose not to go to those doctors, then you pay co-insurance after your deductible is met. So we thought that was good. I think it makes the employees active participants in their health care, kind of the consumerism that the high deductible health plan brought. We're just, I think, taking that a step further. We formed a health insurance employee committee. We've met a handful of times to walk through all of this from the WA, Aetna, all those numbers, all the way through this UHC solution. They favored the UHC solution. We've also had 2 all-employee meetings with a third scheduled for next week, just to seek input. So our plan is to come back and I wanted to present this very briefly here tonight. We want to bring it back next month for action. This is too big of a topic to lay it on your desk and say, doesn't this look great? Why don't you guys vote quick? So if you have questions on it, I know we're tight on time. If you want to shoot me or Melissa, or we can get them to Jeff as well. If you have specific questions on it, we can get those answered, or at least be prepared to answer them in January. But we hope this solution provides minimal disruption and bends that cost trend that we're constantly battling somewhat.
Mr. McCaffrey?
One quick question. The HART designation, is negotiated reimbursements a factor in double HART?
No, the HART designation, the methodology of that is created by Optum, which is a United Healthcare company, but it's based on quality, efficiency, and overall cost. So it's not about the amount that the carrier has negotiated with the doctor.
Okay.
It's really more of the doctor's outcomes and the combination of their outcomes against the cost of the treatment of an episode, how well they perform for diabetics or congestive heart failure patients, and the cost of their episode of care versus the universe, and it really
Okay.
putting aside the United Healthcare discount.
Okay, so there's no tiers of negotiated reimbursement.
No.
$200 for this procedure, and this guy's 300, so we're only gonna give him 1 HART.
No,
The $200
no.
guy's getting 2.
No,
Okay,
good question.
thank you.
I should also add that all hospital expenses are tier 1. This is strictly doctors. Just so clear on that.
Obviously, one thing that we're missing today is district costs, and what's this mean to us as a district?
Yeah,
I mean,
that-
this is great for employees, yeah, and trying to figure out what, what's out there, and I'm glad that you guys held those sessions, and it seemed like there was some good consensus building that perhaps was occurring during those.
Yeah, that obviously is a big question, but keep in mind, we're self-funded, so it's not like we get a premium. No one's developed a premium for us.
Administrative costs and.
There's administrative
there's
costs,
some
but
ins-
ultimately what we call them funding rates is what goes into payroll, who's
Thank you.
paying what. But we need our claims data for this year to develop those funding rates. What we think is, and Jeff, hopefully I'm not
Doing a great job.
going off the talking points here, I guess, is we think that this UHC option, and again, it'll ultimately depend on how much staff goes to the preferred doctors or whatever name you want to give them. But we think this could bend the.
True in both cases.
Correct,
They're
yep.
called different.
Yeah,
things,
Anthem, it's
but-
all, how many people would sign up for the narrow network, and we don't know. But ultimately, we think you can bend the cost trend by about 4%. Is that a fair, whatever that number is? So if trend is showing 9%, it would be 5, and if it's 4, it would be 0, so.
And if you could also give us a feel for, when you talk about disruptions, what do those disruptions look like? Obviously, people who are participating at Freightert, that would be a disruption if we went to Anthem, right? So what percentage of people use Freightert right now? We need a little bit of perspective on some of that.
Yeah,
so.
I can just throw out some
You just run throughout the rough number.
rough numbers. I can tell you that about 55 to 58% of your folks today use the 2 Heart Blue Doctors in United Healthcare. Just they're already doing it without even any intentionality. Under the Anthem platform, which would restrict the hospital choices, we had 20% of the dollars just absolutely fall out of the network. And Freighter was probably close to 10% of that. So anybody who has any inkling about
10% of the 20% or
10% of overall, excuse
Okay.
me, of half. So Freighter was about half overall.
And when you get involved with conversations with Freighter, it's sometimes hard to know, if you go by number of staff, it might not be that big, but the type of care they're getting there sometimes is very specialized. So the disruption's larger than 3% of our staff, and, you have to weight it slightly, I guess.
And we need to have a sense of what disruption is you can imagine all sorts of things. So we need to have a sense of really what does that mean to us, so.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I would add, just to piggyback on what Darren said, is that after we heard the conversations around from the insurance committee and from the all-employee, and we stacked up the notion of trying to engage, as Darren said, employees as active participants in what I'm going to call high-value innovation, going to the right doctors who have the highest scores. The manner in which we could achieve that is one where either you have to make an annual network selection, or you have one where you have more flexibility to do that. And you had to make an annual network selection with Anthem and stick with it and live by it, whereas in the United Healthcare, you float in and out, and it gives the member more flexibility. So having said that, that's why we're landing and bringing back to you the more finite details about United Healthcare and how that compares and everything else.
That was the abbreviated version. But if you do have questions, health insurance is always a very,
I would only say that it's very difficult to exclude a hospital like Freighter from having been through when we went from the trust to United Healthcare, and one person needed this hospital, one person needed that hospital, and then we all had to do special contracts because we had a promise that we would do that, and it was very emotional for people if we didn't do that. So Freighter has such a reputation for certain services that it would be difficult for some people, if they're using those services, to say, I don't want to go anyplace else other than Freighter. That's the case. So anyway.
so we'll agendize this in January for action, and we'll bring back this follow-up points.
Okay, thank you. Monthly budget update, because we're moving right past that ECHE.
It's really great reading. I suggest you all look at the report tonight, and
We may bring it back. I do think the ECHE marketing and the lack of enrollment there is a concern for me. And
it is a really good summary, a detailed summary of the marketing for eAchieve, so take if you're interested in it, certainly take a look. I thought Rick did a nice job on that.
yeah, so I think that's where we need to focus a lot of our attention when it comes to ECHE, but see how it goes. Monthly budget update.
I'll make it brief. It's good. There's no anomalies. Everything's running as it should be.
I could see my board report on Wednesday night saying, it's good.
If you would like me to go through it, I'm happy to go through it.
Well, just make
but-
sure there's enough detail when I report to the board on Wednesday night to
We'll
make
give you
sure.
some
Okay,
things to discuss.
okay, very well. There are no discussion items tonight. We've had a lot of discussion anyway. With that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.